Hi and welcome to this cell biology video on eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. Let's start by looking at animal cells. Animal cells have a cytoplasm, which is a liquid-like substance and gives the cells its shape and is a location of many chemical reactions for that cell. To stop this cytoplasm from seeping out, there is a barrier called the cell membrane. And this barrier is semi-permeable, meaning it will allow certain things into the cell, such as oxygen or glucose, and will allow certain things to leave the cell, such as carbon dioxide, urea, or any waste product. Animal cells also contain a nucleus that encases their genetic material. There are mitochondria, and these are effectively the power stations of the cell, and they release energy locked up in glucose in the reactions of aerobic respiration. And in order to make proteins to use within the cell or beyond the cell, these proteins have to be made on structures called ribosomes. Now, animal cells are very, very small. You need a microscope to be able to see them. In terms of their sizes, they range from 10 micrometers to about 30 micrometers in size. And to put this into perspective, there are 1,000 micrometers per millimetre. So for a smaller animal cell, 10 micrometers, you could fit about 100 of these in a millimetre. For the larger animal cells, you're looking at fitting approximately 33 of these within a millimetre. Plant cells, on the other hand, have the same structures that we've just mentioned in animal cells, but they have these extra features. One of the things to be mindful of with plant cells is that plant cells need to be as full up with water as possible. Plants don't have a skeletal structure like we do, and they need to be as upright as possible to collect as much sunlight for photosynthesis. So in order for them to be upright, they're relying on every single cell to be as full up or turgid with water, so that these cells have more of a brick-like shape and they actually stack on top of one another. There is a problem though, in terms of maintaining turgidity of the cell, being full up with water, there is a risk and a thin line between being full up and actually bursting, and that thin line is in fact this cell membrane. It is quite delicate and can easily be broken. So plant cells are lucky in the sense that they have this extra feature, which animal cells don't need. The extra feature is called a cell wall, and importantly, it is always the line drawn on the outside of the cell membrane. Often students muddle up cell membrane with cell wall, and a cell wall will be the line on the outside, whereas a cell membrane will be the line right next to the cytoplasm. In plant cells, these cell walls are made up of a substance called cellulose. Another feature that plant cells have is a bag called a vacuole, and this is filled with cell sap. And depending on water availability, this vacuole can expand or it can shrink. And most plant cells, in addition to these features, have chloroplasts. You won't find chloroplasts in any cell that could be found under the soil, because chloroplasts contain a pigment that's designed to trap sunlight, so there's no point in having these underground where there's no sunlight. The pigment is called chlorophyll, and it's used to harness the energy from sunlight to actually make glucose, which is a simple sugar that plants can basically make any other food group from, which is why plants are called producers. Plant cells are a little bit bigger than animal cells. They range from 10 micrometers like they did in animal cells, but they can go all the way up to 100 micrometers. So in essence, with a maximum plant cell size, you can actually fit 10 of these within a millimeter. Now, animal and plant cells belong to a group called the eukaryotes. Fungi and protists will also belong to this group, and this group is categorized by the fact that their cells have all the kind of things like cytoplasm, cell membrane, but most importantly, their genetic material is contained within a nucleus. Prokaryotic cells, on the other hand, are much, much smaller, and by prokaryotic cells I mean bacteria really. They have the same features. They have a cell membrane, a cytoplasm. They also have ribosomes because they need to make proteins too, but their ribosomes are slightly smaller than eukaryotic ribosomes. But unlike eukaryotic cells like plants and animals, bacteria don't have a nucleus instead. And also, their DNA isn't linear, so it's not on little chromosomes. In fact, it is a continuous sort of circular loop with no beginning and no end. And this is freely swimming about in the cytoplasm, not contained within a nucleus. That's one of the key differences between eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells. So everything so far on this side, genetic material, cell membrane, cytoplasm, ribosomes, are found in every single bacterial cell. On this side are the kind of bolt-on features that some bacteria have, depending on what that bacteria does, where it lives, etc. So when bacteria divide, they literally copy everything inside them. So they'll copy this loop of genetic material, which contains all the instructions to make a new bacterial cell, and then it will split down the middle. This form of cell division is called, it's got a particular name, it's called binary fission. But some bacteria have these smaller loops of DNA called plasmids. Now, there's not a lot of genes on these loops, so there isn't a full set of instructions to make a new bacterial cell. But the kind of scary thing about these is that they can actually be passed very easily from one bacterial cell to another and cross species. And often bacteria exchange genes that confer resistance to antibiotics. So it's very, very scary, and it's very easy for antibiotic resistance to kind of spread amongst several species of bacteria. So one would look at plasmids as being kind of a bad thing. However, we've learned that because plasmids can be exchanged really, really freely between bacteria, that if we cut them, open them up using enzymes, and put in a gene from a different species, so we could put in a human gene to make something like insulin, we could then genetically engineer bacteria to produce medicines for our needs. So in another sense, plasmids can be really, really useful. Some bacteria live in water, so they have to swim. So it makes sense for them to have kind of a tail, which we call a flagellum, and often they might have more than one of these. Some bacteria, on the other hand, live in the air. So you could have bacteria on your skin or on the electronic device that you're watching this video through. And to prevent these bacteria from drying out, they have this very slimy, mucousy based layer around the outside of the cells called a slime capsule. So, a good way of summarising the differences between bacteria, animal cells and plant cells is through a table that's comparing which features are present or not present in each of the categories. So you could pause the video at this point and kind of test yourself by completing the table, or if you're still with me, we'll go through it together now. So animal and plant cells are eukaryotes, meaning that they have a true nucleus. Bacteria are prokaryotes, the nucleus is absent. All cells would have a cytoplasm, and to keep that cytoplasm contained then must be a cell membrane. A cell wall is definitely not present in animals, but plants do have a cell wall. It's made of the substance cellulose. Bacteria also have a cell wall. It's made of a different substance. You don't need to be concerned with the name of it. Ribosomes are present in all of them because all types of cell need to make proteins. Mitochondria are, to remind you, structures that release energy from aerobic respiration. You find them in animal cells and plant cells. Bacteria are still living, they do need to respire, and they could carry out exactly the same reaction for respiration that animal and plants can do. However, bacteria just do this using enzymes that are actually embedded in their cell membrane. So they can still respire, but they just don't have mitochondria to help. Animal cells do not have chloroplasts. They cannot make food via photosynthesis. Plants can, bacteria cannot. Size-wise, animal cells are between 10 and 30 micrometers. Plant cells, slightly bigger, between 10 and 100 micrometers. Bacteria are very small. In fact, you're looking at an average of about 1 micrometer in length for a bacterial cell, which is tiny. Bacteria can infect plant cells and animal cells, being much smaller, and comparatively, a plant cell could be up to 100 times bigger than a bacterial cell. So that finishes our video on eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. Thank you very much for watching.